Today we're going to work on the muscle up. And the muscle up is very, very important in parkour for two reasons. The first one being it's a very effective climbing drill of getting you from below an obstacle to being on top of an obstacle. Second reason it's very, very useful. It's actually a very good strength and conditioning drill too for building upper body strength in the pulling and pushing chains. You'll very often find yourself in parkour in a position where you're hanging from something, whether that's on a branch or a bar or a wall. So the muscle up and being able to do the muscle up effectively is very useful in parkour, from getting you from that hanging position that you always find yourself in to being on top in a quick dynamic motion. So you don't want all of your routes to be nice and smooth and nice and fast. You get to a wall and you can't climb up afterwards. So working on that section individually of just having a really strong muscle up will translate and carry across to all your other areas in parkour too. So when you're first working on the muscle ups, you want to find a bar that's a little bit lower than one you can fully hang from. So if I hang from this one, you'll see my feet have to actually tuck up to the side to get a full reach. And this is what you're looking for in the beginning with the muscle ups really. You want to find a lower bar that you can actually grab the top and jump into the technique for the first few times to get used to how that feels and to give the upper body a little bit of help using the legs. The higher the bar is, the harder it's going to be, and the more you'll have to jump to provide support from the legs. And if the bar is too low, you'll find it's too easy. So you have to find that middle ground in between, depending on your strength levels and your height. But for a beginner level, just over head height would be quite useful for you. You want to have to be able to use the actual range of motion from the arms and start that pulling motion from the arms, and you're supporting that with the jump afterwards. So as you progress with the muscle up, the idea is to use the same bar, but to jump less with the legs. So the less you use the legs, the more you'll have to rely on using the upper body and a very, very strong dynamic pull, and finishing with a quick push at the top, so the top of the dip position basically. The more you need to provide support with the legs, the lower that bar will have to be. And again, you're looking at the same sort of idea of having the bar in front of you here, hands on the bar first, and then adding support from the legs and pushing up, and then finishing the movement with the arms. So getting the body working exactly the same way it would for the muscle up itself, but with more help and more support from the legs. There are a few common areas in the muscle up where people might have a few problems. The first one being that if your body naturally wants to go with one arm first, so whether it wants to go down with the right first or the left first, but not keeping the arms together. If this is the case, I'd recommend finding a lower bar, going back to basics. It's working on that technique of having both hands on the bar at the same time, using more of the legs and getting used to that switch with both hands at the same time. You want to avoid going with one hand first too much, because it will put the shoulder in a compromising position and may cause damage to the shoulder itself. So having both hands transitioning at the same time is much safer. So the pulling motion of the muscle up itself has to be quite dynamic and quite powerful. That's what takes you through the transition of going from the full hang to the top position of the pull up, and then through that awkward range of motion in the middle towards the dip. So the more dynamic that pulling motion is from here to here, the higher it will take you, and the easier it will be to get through that awkward transition area to the actual dip itself. So a nice explosive pull up is what you want. And the higher you can pull with the pull up, the less work there'll be to do with the dip. So if you can actually pull the bar beyond that normal range of motion that might finish here, a little bit higher and get it towards that chest and solar plexus region, there'll be less work to do for the actual dip itself. So it will make the whole process easier. So in the early stages of the muscle up, don't be afraid to use a small swing at the beginning of the movement. So from that full hanging position, once you progress from jumping into the movement slightly, then don't be afraid to use a small swing at the bottom of the pull, just to kind of start the momentum going from forward to back. You don't need too much, but a small swing will really help. And then working on the timing of when you start to pull from that swing. You have to pull at that last moment when the body's swinging forwards. As it's about to swing back again, that's when you want to start the pull and engage those pulling muscles so that it brings you up and over the top of the bar. If you pull too late, what will happen is you'll end up coming under the bar and your chest will be in this position underneath the bar, which will make it very, very hard to get the weight over to that dip position. If you start too late, you won't get the actual height you need to get up and over the bar either. So working on that timing of the swing and when you start to pull is very, very important. Alongside the jumping into the muscle up technique, you can also work on the eccentric portion of the movement, which is just starting at the top position. So the bar will be at your waist and lowering down slowly and controlled through to that full hanging position at the bottom. This will work the same muscle groups as the muscle up itself, just in the eccentric range of motion, which will also build strength in the required areas. So as well as working on the pull-ups themselves and the muscle up technique on the bar, jumping into it, the other individual exercise to work on is the dips. So the actual dip exercise itself of using the bars or a wall if you prefer, but going to your straight arm position, starting here. Again, working the full range of motion with the arms straight for a start, coming all the way down, the chest touches the rail of the bar, and push back up. So all the way down and back up. If you want to add weight to this exercise, you can use a weight jacket or something similar, but you want to build a lot of strength in that range of motion using the pushing chain, as that will make the top portion of the muscle up much easier. If you're having trouble with the transition of the muscle up, of going from the top area of the pool through to the dip itself, make sure you're leaning forward enough after the pull-up. So if you find yourself after that first part of the swing and the pull, that you start to lean back just slightly, that'll take you into a harder position to make that transition to the dip. So make sure that as you begin that pull, you're starting the body leaning forward in that curling forward position here, and a slight dish position of the body, ready for that dip. If you're leaning back at any point in this and arching the back, you'll find the whole technique much harder. So again, key points for the muscle up are to find a good bar to start with, one that's not too high, not too low, depending on your strength levels and experience, but finding a bar that you can hold onto and jump into the technique using the legs first. The more you use the legs, the easier it will be. So as you get stronger and more confident with the technique, you can use the legs less and less. But a good sized bar is the key one. Second stage to work on really is having a nice dynamic pull. So working on that pull up, whether that's using bands in the beginning to work on your pull up and make it stronger, or if you're already quite strong with the pull ups, you can also work with a weighted vest to add more resistance. But working on the pull up motion, also working on dips, same sort of idea, adding resistance if you need to. And then working on the timing of that swing, so having that small swing at the beginning of the motion and working on pulling right at the point where your body's about to swing back. So the timing of the swing is very, very important, and timing of that pull is very important too. Key point number 3 is after you start to pull, make sure the body's in a hollow position, so that dish position from gymnastics you might have heard of. Always keeping the body slightly rounded, slightly forwards, so that you can get over the bar and not find yourself stuck under the bar, so always leaning forwards. So effectively the muscle up is just a climbing technique in parkour. It gets you from a position below the obstacle, being on top of the obstacle. So whether it's using muscle ups or climb ups, it's something you're going to use all the time in parkour, which is why it's very important the technique is sound and you're very strong in these regions.